He found a winged girl crying in the woods. 20 years later, her fleet split the sky. It was a quiet evening when Lucas found her. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the forest floor. The leaves rustled softly in the cool breeze, and the world felt peaceful, almost unreal. Lucas had been hiking through the woods, as he often did, enjoying the solitude. He was used to the quiet of nature, but today something was different. There was a stillness in the air that felt unnatural, like the calm before a storm. He had just crossed a small stream when he saw her. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light. But then, as he stepped closer, he realized it was a girl sitting alone beneath the old oak tree. She was crying, her face hidden in her hands. Her wings were the most unusual thing about her, shimmering feathers that seemed to glow faintly, even in the fading light. They were large and delicate, stretching out from her back in an arc that almost touched the ground. Lucas froze, unsure of what he was seeing. He had heard stories about strange creatures and legends in the woods, but never had he imagined something like this. He stepped forward cautiously, not wanting to startle her. His heart raced with curiosity and a strange sense of protectiveness. "Hey," he called softly, his voice gentle. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up, startled, her bright eyes meeting his. For a moment they just stared at each other, the silence hanging between them. Her eyes were wide with fear, but there was also something else in them, something ancient and powerful. She opened her mouth to speak, but her voice faltered. She couldn't seem to find the right words. I don't know where I am," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Lucas knelt down in front of her, trying to be as non-threatening as possible. He noticed that her wings, though beautiful, looked worn, like they had been through something difficult. She was trembling, but there was a strength to her that Lucas couldn't ignore. "You're in the woods," he said, trying to offer reassurance. "Where did you come from?" The girl shook her head, her hands gripping the grass beneath her. I don't remember," she said, her voice shaking. "I don't remember anything. I was flying and then—" Her words trailed off, and she seemed to shrink into herself. Lucas felt a pang of sympathy for her. He couldn't imagine what it would be like to lose everything, your memory, your identity, your sense of purpose. But there was something else too, something that Lucas couldn't explain. He felt a strange connection to her, as if they were tied together by some unseen force. "My name's Lucas," he said, offering her a gentle smile. "What's yours?" The girl looked at him, her brow furrowing in concentration. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. After a long moment, she shook her head. "I don't know, I can't remember." Lucas felt his heart ache. He had no idea what was going on, but he couldn't leave her here alone. She was clearly lost, scared, and in need of help. He made a quick decision. "You don't have to remember right now," he said, his voice firm. "You're safe here, I can help you." The girl seemed to hesitate, as if unsure whether to trust him, but then she nodded slowly. Lucas offered her a hand, and after a moment's pause, she took it. Her fingers were cold, like ice, but there was a warmth in her touch that made him feel like he was holding onto something fragile, something precious. Together they stood up, and Lucas helped her walk back toward his cabin. He had a small, rustic home deep in the forest, far from the nearest town. It was his escape from the world, a place where he could clear his head and forget about the chaos of life. But today, the quiet had been shattered. There was a mystery here, and Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that it had something to do with the girl at his side. The walk back was slow, the air growing colder as the evening deepened. Lucas kept glancing at the girl, trying to gauge if she was okay. She didn't say much, but every now and then he saw her wince, as though something was troubling her. Her wings, though beautiful, seemed heavy, as if they weighed her down. And there was something in her eyes, something he couldn't quite place. A look that suggested she knew more than she was letting on, but she was too afraid to say anything. When they reached his cabin, Lucas led her inside. The small room was dim, lit only by the glow of the fireplace. He set down his backpack and turned to her, unsure of what to do next. She looked around the cabin, her eyes wide, as if she had never seen anything like it before. It was simple, a few wooden chairs, a table, some shelves stacked with books, but to her it might as well have been a palace. She had no memory of anything, not even the basics of life. "I'll get you some water," Lucas said, moving toward the kitchen. "You must be thirsty." She didn't respond, but he could see her eyes flicking around the room, taking in every detail. He filled a glass with water and handed it to her. She took it slowly, as if savoring each drop. Her hands trembled as she held the glass, and Lucas couldn't help but notice that her fingers were covered in faint, glowing marks, almost like tattoos. They seemed to pulse softly, as though alive. "Do you remember anything?" Lucas asked gently, sitting down across from her. "Anything at all?" The girl looked at him, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she was trying to concentrate. Then finally she spoke again. "I remember the sky," she said quietly. "I remember flying. I was with others, but now I'm alone." Her voice cracked as she spoke, and Lucas could see the pain in her eyes. She didn't just want to remember her past, she needed to. Something had happened to her, something that had ripped away her memories and left her stranded in this world. Lucas didn't know what to say. He felt helpless, but he wasn't going to leave her alone. There was something about her, something that made him believe that if he helped her, everything would be okay. "You're not alone," he said, his voice calm. "I'm here to help you." The girl looked at him, her expression softening slightly. She didn't say anything in response, but the way she gazed at him told him everything he needed to know. She was scared, lost, but she was beginning to trust him. The night deepened outside, and as the wind howled through the trees, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Whatever had brought the girl here, whatever was happening, it was far from over, and he was going to be a part of it. As he sat across from her, watching the fire crackle in the hearth, Lucas couldn't help but wonder, who was this girl really? And why had she appeared in his life on that strange, quiet evening? He didn't know the answers yet. But deep down, he felt a strange certainty that their paths had crossed for a reason. And whatever happened next, they were in this together. Days turned into weeks, and Alara settled into a quiet routine with Lucas at his cabin in the woods. The outside world seemed distant, almost irrelevant to her now. She had no memory of where she came from, no recollection of her past or the life she once lived. But she was safe here, and for the first time since she arrived, she felt like she might be able to find peace. Lucas did everything he could to make her feel at home. He taught her about the world, about food, customs, and even simple things like how to read. But no matter how many books she read, no matter how much time passed, Alara could never escape the feeling that something was missing. She was different, and she knew it. The glowing marks on her skin pulsed softly, always reminding her of that fact. The more she tried to remember, the more fragments of her past began to surface. In her dreams, she saw images of stars, vast, swirling galaxies stretching out in every direction. She heard voices in strange languages, and she saw faces that were both familiar and foreign. But the dreams never made sense. They were like pieces of a puzzle she couldn't quite fit together. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Alara sat on the porch, watching the colors of the sky change from gold to pink. The cool wind brushed against her skin, and for a brief moment she felt as though everything in the world was perfect. She closed her eyes, listening to the sounds of nature, the rustling of the leaves, the distant calls of birds, the trickling of the nearby stream. "Do you ever miss it?" Lucas's voice broke through her thoughts. Alara opened her eyes and turned to face him. He was standing at the edge of the porch, his gaze fixed on the woods. His face was tired, but there was a warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. "Miss what?" she asked, though she knew the answer. "Your home," he said quietly. "Wherever that is." Alara hesitated, her wings fluttering slightly in response to the emotion building inside her. She had thought about it often, what it would be like to remember her past, to return to where she came from. But she didn't know where that place was. She didn't even know who she was anymore. "I don't know where home is," she replied, her voice soft. "I don't remember anything before I woke up in the woods." Lucas took a step closer. "But you must remember something. You have to." She shook her head slowly, feeling a sharp ache in her chest. "I don't think I can." They stood in silence for a moment, the tension hanging between them. Lucas didn't press her, though he wanted to. He could see the pain in her eyes, and it made him feel helpless. He had promised to help her, but there were limits to what he could do. "I know you're trying," he said finally, his voice gentle. "But maybe there's a way to figure this out. Maybe we can find answers together." Alara looked at him, grateful for his words, but unsure how to move forward. The weight of her lost memories was heavy, and the fear that she might never get them back felt suffocating. "I don't even know where to start," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. Lucas smiled, though it was more of a soft, reassuring gesture than a real expression of joy. "Maybe we start with what you do know," he suggested. "You know how to read. You know the world is different from the one you remember. What else can you remember?" Ilara thought for a moment. The memories that came to her were scattered, disconnected. But one thing was certain, there were flashes of something more, something bigger. Her wings, for one. They were a part of her, but they were also a mystery. They felt like they belonged to a world she didn't understand. And then there was the strange energy that seemed to flow through her, the same energy that made her wings glow. She could feel it pulsing inside her, like a heartbeat that wasn't entirely her own. "I don't know what these wings are," she said slowly, glancing at the glowing feathers that extended behind her. "But I know they're important. I don't know why, but I feel like they're connected to my past, to who I am." Lucas nodded, sensing the weight of her words. He had never asked about her wings, not directly. It felt wrong to pry into something so personal, but now he couldn't ignore the strange energy surrounding her any longer. "Maybe we should look for answers outside," he suggested. "There must be someone who knows something. If your wings are a part of something bigger, maybe there's a place where others like you are. You can't be the only one." Ilara's heart skipped at the thought. Others like her? She had never considered that possibility. She had always felt so alone, like she was the only one of her kind. But if there were others, then perhaps there was hope. Perhaps she could find the answers she was searching for. "Do you think we could?" she asked, her voice tinged with both fear and hope. Lucas nodded. "I think we have to try." The idea of leaving the safety of the cabin was daunting, but Lucas's words filled Ilara with a sense of determination she hadn't felt before. Maybe this was the key to unlocking the mystery of her past. Maybe there was more to her story than she had ever imagined. The next morning, they set off on a journey that would take them far beyond the woods, farther than Ilara had ever gone before. They didn't know where they were headed or what they would find, but they knew they couldn't stay in the cabin forever. Ilara had to learn about herself, and Lucas was determined to help her. They traveled through quiet towns and bustling cities, asking questions and following leads. But each time they thought they were close to finding answers, they were met with confusion or silence. It seemed that no one had ever heard of someone like Ilara. The people they met looked at her with curiosity, but there was also fear in their eyes. It was as if they could sense the power within her, and it made them uneasy. As the days passed, Ilara grew more and more frustrated. The world felt vast and empty, full of answers that were just out of reach. But Lucas never wavered in his determination to help her. He remained by her side, offering quiet support when the weight of her journey seemed too much to bear. One evening, as they sat beneath a star-filled sky, Ilara felt a strange pull deep inside her. It was a faint sensation at first, like a whisper from the depths of her memory. But as the night wore on, the feeling grew stronger. Her wings began to glow more brightly, and she could sense the energy inside her building. "Lucas," she said softly, her voice filled with wonder. "I think I'm starting to remember." The days that followed were filled with questions, but also a strange kind of peace. Ilara felt something stirring within her, a deep sense that the answers were just within reach. As they traveled, Lucas kept a steady pace, never pressing her to remember more than she was ready to face. He knew that the journey was as much about patience as it was about finding answers. By now, they had moved from small towns to larger cities. The cities were vast, filled with people, noise, and energy that was both overwhelming and comforting. Ilara had never been in places like these before. She had seen crowded streets, bright lights, and towering buildings. But no matter how many new places they visited, it always felt like something was missing. Lucas, however, was a different story. He loved the adventure. Every new city, every new person they met, felt like a step closer to discovering something important. But the more they searched, the more Lucas began to sense a strange unease in the air. People didn't want to talk about Ilara. They looked at her with suspicion, some even with fear. It was subtle, but Lucas could feel it. It wasn't until one evening, as they entered a small, quiet village, that things began to change. The sky had been cloudy all day, and the distant rumble of thunder echoed through the valley. As they approached the village, Lucas noticed that something felt different. The air was thick with tension, and the usual calm of the countryside seemed to have evaporated. As they walked through the streets, Lucas caught sight of people whispering to one another, casting nervous glances in their direction. It was the first time he felt truly uneasy. Ilara was still by his side, her face serene but guarded, as if she sensed something too. They reached the village square and Lucas paused. There was an old man sitting by a fountain watching them carefully. His eyes were sharp and his posture stiff, as though he had been waiting for them. As they drew closer, the old man stood and nodded. "You've come looking for answers," he said in a voice that was rough with age. It wasn't a question, but a statement. Alara stepped forward, her heart racing. There was something about this man that made her feel like he knew more than he was letting on. She opened her mouth to speak, but the old man held up a hand, silencing her. "Not yet," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "You must understand that the world you are searching for doesn't exist anymore. Your people, they are gone." Alara's breath caught in her throat. Her mind flashed to the fragments of her dreams, the stars, the ships, the voices. Was it true? Was her people really gone? "But there are others," Lucas said, his voice low but steady. "We've been looking for anyone who might know what happened to her. Who is she?" "Where does she come from?" The old man gave a small, bitter laugh. "The ones who remember don't talk. The ones who know, they hide." He paused for a moment, looking up at the sky. The wind began to pick up, rustling the trees and sending a chill through the air. "You're not just looking for answers," the old man continued. "You're being hunted." The words struck Alara like a thunderclap. Her heart began to race, and her wings fluttered nervously. She had always known that there was something about her past that wasn't just lost, it was dangerous. But to hear it from this stranger made the reality of it all too real. "Hunted?" Lucas asked, his voice sharp. "By who?" The old man glanced around as if checking to see if anyone was listening. Then he leaned in closer. "There are those who would use her powers, for their own gain. They will stop at nothing to find her. And when they do, they won't let her go." Alara felt the weight of his words settle deep into her chest. She looked at Lucas, and for the first time, she saw the same fear in his eyes that she felt inside herself. She had been running for so long, but now it seemed like she couldn't outrun what was coming. "But how do we stop them?" Lucas asked, his voice steady but filled with concern. The old man shook his head slowly. "You can't, not yet. The only way to protect her is to find the others. There's a place deep in the mountains where the last of her kind have hidden. If she wants to survive, she must go there. It's the only chance." Alara stared at him in disbelief. The last of her kind. She had always felt so alone, so different. But now, the possibility that there were others like her filled her with both hope and dread. What would she find there, and who else would she have to face? The wind began to howl as the storm drew closer, the sky darkening with every passing moment. Lucas placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, sensing her fear. "We'll go," he said, his voice unwavering. "We'll find this place, we'll find the others, and we'll keep you safe." The old man nodded, his expression grim. "You don't understand. They've already found you. You have no idea what's coming. If you're going to make it to the mountains, you'll need to be ready for anything." Alara's heart pounded in her chest. She had always known something was coming, something big. But the idea that her search for answers had already put her in danger filled her with dread. What kind of enemies would she face? What kind of forces were at work against her? Without another word, the old man turned and began walking away, disappearing into the shadows. Lucas and Alara stood in the village square, the storm growing stronger with every passing second. "We need to move," Lucas said urgently, "before they come." They didn't have to wait long. As the first flashes of lightning lit up the sky, they heard the sound of distant engines, deep, thunderous roars that seemed to shake the ground beneath their feet. Alara looked up, her eyes wide with fear. "They're here," she whispered. "They found me." Lucas didn't hesitate. Grabbing Alara's hand, he pulled her into a nearby alleyway out of sight from the main road. They crouched down, their hearts racing as the sound of the engines grew louder. Alara's wings fluttered nervously, the glowing markings on her skin pulsating with energy. She could feel them getting closer, the danger closing in on them from all sides. For the first time since they had begun this journey, Alara felt truly scared. The world was no longer the place she thought it was. Her past, her powers, and everything she had once believed were being ripped away, piece by piece. But through it all, she knew one thing for certain: she couldn't stop running. Not now, not when the storm was already here. "We have to keep going," Lucas said, his voice steady despite the fear that gripped them both. "We'll make it to the mountains, we'll find the others." But Alara wasn't so sure. What if they were too late? What if the danger was already too great? As the storm raged around them, Alara clutched Lucas's hand tightly, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. The rain fell in sheets, soaking everything in its path. The storm raged around them as Lucas and Alara made their way through the narrow alleys, moving quickly but quietly. They had to get to the mountains. They had to escape the enemies who were now hunting them, drawing closer with every passing second. The air was thick with tension, and every sound, from the crackling of distant thunder to the sound of their footsteps, felt amplified in the storm. Alara's heart was racing. She had never felt so vulnerable, so exposed. Her wings were now tucked tightly against her back, hidden beneath her coat, but the strange energy within her still pulsed, glowing faintly through her skin. She could feel it, stronger than ever, and it made her nervous. It wasn't just her wings that made her different. There was something inside her, something powerful and dangerous, that she couldn't fully control. Lucas kept a firm grip on her hand, guiding her through the city. His calm, steady presence helped to anchor her, but even he was starting to look over his shoulder, his eyes darting to every shadow. It was only a matter of time before the people hunting them found them, and then there would be nowhere left to run. "Do you know where we're going?" Alara asked, her voice quiet but filled with uncertainty. Lucas didn't answer immediately, but she could see the focus in his eyes. He was thinking. He was always thinking, always planning ahead. After everything they had been through, it had become clear to Alara that Lucas was more than just her protector. He was her partner. They were in this together, and she trusted him completely. "There's an old safe house in the mountains," he finally said, his voice steady despite the fear that lingered in the back of his mind. "It's the only place I know that's safe. We'll make it there." Alara nodded, her heart heavy with doubt but also with a sense of determination. They had to make it. She had no other choice. The alternative was to face the unknown dangers that were hunting her. If they didn't get to the safe house, there would be no one left to help her, no one left to stand against what was coming. They moved swiftly, making their way out of the city and into the more remote areas. The streets grew quieter as they passed through the outskirts, and Alara felt a momentary sense of relief. But the calm didn't last long. The storm intensified, and the wind howled as they climbed higher into the hills. The trees around them seemed to lean in, whispering warnings in the wind. It felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something. As they reached the foot of the mountain, Alara could see the silhouette of the safe house in the distance, a small cabin hidden among the trees. It looked peaceful from here, but she knew better. There was no such thing as peace for her anymore. Her life had changed forever the moment she had landed in the woods. The moment her wings had started to glow, and the strange, ancient energy within her had awoken. They reached the cabin just as the rain turned to hail. The wind was fierce, and the air was thick with the storm. Alara felt the energy inside her flare up again, growing stronger as they approached the cabin. It felt like something was drawing her in, something that wanted her to know the truth. When they reached the door, Lucas pulled out a small key and unlocked it. The door creaked open and they stepped inside. The warmth of the cabin was a welcome contrast to the cold outside, but the tension between them was still palpable. They were safe, for now, but Alara couldn't shake the feeling that this moment of safety was fleeting. Inside the cabin, there was only one room. A few wooden chairs, a small table, a simple fireplace. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Lucas quickly started a fire in the fireplace, his movements steady and practiced. Alara stood near the window, watching the storm rage outside, her mind spinning with thoughts of the journey ahead. "We're safe here," Lucas said, his voice calm as he sat down beside her. "For now, anyway." Alara nodded but didn't reply. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The energy inside her was still building, swirling like a storm inside her chest. It was more than just the fear of being hunted, it was something else. Something deeper, more ancient. "I feel it," she said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. "There's something inside me, something I don't understand." Lucas turned to face her, his expression softening. "I know," he said gently. "We'll figure it out, we're in this together." Alara didn't reply. She didn't know what was happening, but she felt as though she was on the edge of something big. The energy inside her wasn't just a part of her anymore. It felt like it was a part of the world itself. The storm outside seemed to echo the turmoil inside her, and for a moment she wondered if the two were connected. Then in the distance she heard it. The faint sound of engines, the same deep roar that had haunted them before. Her heart skipped in her chest. "They're here," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Lucas stood up, his hand instinctively reaching for the weapon he had kept hidden. "Stay low," he instructed, his voice sharp. "We need to get to higher ground. They won't expect us to move if we keep quiet." Alara followed him without hesitation. They moved quickly through the cabin and out the back, where a small path led up into the mountains. The hail had stopped, but the wind was still fierce, and the dark clouds above seemed to hang low, threatening more rain. As they climbed the path, Alara could hear the engines getting closer, their sound vibrating through the ground beneath her feet. They reached a rocky outcrop above the cabin, hidden from view. From here, they could see the searchlights of the enemy ships as they began to circle the area. The ships were massive, their shapes dark and ominous against the stormy sky. "Do they know we're here?" Alara asked, her voice tight with fear. Lucas didn't answer immediately. His eyes were focused on the ships, watching their movements carefully. "Not yet," he said finally, "but they will. They always do." The air was thick with anticipation as the ships began to descend, their engines roaring as they neared the ground. Alara could feel the energy inside her building, the same power that had always been with her, but now it felt different, stronger, almost alive. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We fight," Lucas said, his voice filled with resolve. "We fight and we make them regret ever coming after you." For a moment, Alara could only stare at the ships, the fear almost suffocating her. But then she felt it, the power inside her, the energy that had always been with her, stirring to life. It was time to face what she had been running from, time to face the enemies who had been hunting her for so long. The ships landed with a thud, their massive feet touching the ground with an almost unnatural grace. Alara took a deep breath, her wings unfurling slightly as the energy inside her began to rise. Lucas turned to her, his eyes locked on hers. "We'll make it through this. I believe in you." And for the first time, Alara believed in herself too. The night had fallen, and the storm was still raging. The ships that had landed near the safe house were massive, their sleek, dark shapes casting long shadows across the rocky ground. Alara could feel the weight of their presence, the silent threat that hovered just beyond the cabin, waiting to close in. The energy inside her was alive, thrumming with power she didn't fully understand, but it was a power she couldn't ignore anymore. The time for hiding was over. The ships, searchlights swept across the landscape, scanning the hills and valleys, but they had no idea where Lucas and Alara were hiding. From their vantage point, they could see everything, and for a moment it almost felt like they were the ones in control. But Alara knew it wouldn't last. The enemy was relentless, and soon they would find them. "We need to move," Lucas said quietly, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "We can't stay here. They'll find us if we don't act." Alara nodded, her wings fluttering slightly as she stood up. The wind howled around them, but she felt a calmness inside her, a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. The storm outside seemed to echo the storm inside her. She wasn't just running from her past anymore, she was going to face it head-on. "I know," she said, her voice low but firm. "But where do we go?" Lucas didn't hesitate, he had a plan. "There's a place deep in the mountains," he said. "A hidden base where the last of your people are supposed to be. If we can get there, we might have a chance." Alara's heart skipped at the mention of others like her. She had spent so long feeling alone, unsure of who she was and where she came from. But if what Lucas said was true, then there was hope. There were others who might understand what was happening to her, who could help her control the power within her. "I trust you," she said, looking him in the eye. "Let's go." The two of them moved quickly, slipping through the trees and rocks, trying to stay as quiet as possible. The ships were still close, but they had no choice. They had to keep moving, even if it meant risking everything. Alara felt the familiar rush of energy inside her, the power building with every step they took. It was as if the very earth beneath her feet was calling her, guiding her toward the place she had to go. As they moved deeper into the mountains, the air grew thinner, the cold sharper. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung heavy above them, casting a dim light over the path ahead. Alara's wings were tense against her back, itching with energy. She could feel something in the distance, something pulling her toward it like a magnet drawing her in. She knew without a doubt that it was the place Lucas had mentioned. It was where her past, her people, and her future all waited for her. They reached the base just as dawn was breaking. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the clouds, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. The base was hidden deep within the mountain range, nestled in a valley that was nearly impossible to find unless you knew exactly where to look. It was a small, unassuming structure, but Alara could feel the presence of something powerful within it. This was where everything would change. Lucas turned to her, his face grim but determined. "We're here," he said. "Now we need to figure out how to get inside." Before Alara could respond, a low, mechanical hum filled the air. The ground beneath them began to shake as the massive doors to the base slowly opened. The air around them crackled with energy, and Alara's heart raced as she stepped forward, her wings fluttering with anticipation. The doors opened fully, revealing a large chamber inside. The walls were lined with strange technology, machines that hummed with power, glowing with an eerie light. But it wasn't the technology that caught Alara's attention. It was the people. The beings who stood in the center of the room, their faces masked in shadow, their eyes glowing faintly. They were like her. The realization hit Alara like a bolt of lightning. These were her people, the ones she had been searching for all this time. They were not gone, as the old man had told her. They had been hiding, waiting for the right moment to emerge. One of them stepped forward, a tall figure cloaked in dark robes. Alara couldn't make out their features, but there was something familiar about them, something that made her feel both nervous and comforted at the same time. The figure raised a hand, and the others in the room fell silent. "Alara," the figure said, their voice soft but powerful. "We've been waiting for you." Alara took a step forward, her heart racing. "Who are you? What is this place?" "We are the last of your kind," the figure said. "We've been hiding here, waiting for the moment when you would come to us. The power inside you is stronger than you know, and now it's time for you to embrace it." Alara felt a wave of emotion crash over her. For so long, she had felt like an outsider, like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. But now, here she was, surrounded by others like her. It was both a relief and a heavy burden. She didn't know if she was ready to embrace the power within her, to accept what it meant. But there was no going back now. The moment had come. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" The figure's eyes glowed brighter as they stepped closer. "We want you to lead us," they said. "You are the heir to our people's legacy. You have the power to restore what has been lost. But you must make a choice, Alara. You must choose whether to use that power to destroy our enemies, or to save the world from the chaos that threatens to consume it." Alara's mind raced. The weight of the decision pressed down on her shoulders, but she knew deep down that she couldn't turn away from it. The storm inside her, the energy that had been growing stronger every day, was a part of her. It had always been a part of her. And now it was time to decide how to use it. Lucas stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder. He was waiting, just like she was, for the right moment to make the choice. He had always believed in her, always been there to support her. But this was her decision, and it was up to her to make it. "I don't want to destroy," Alara said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "I want to rebuild. I want to bring peace." The figure nodded, their expression softening. "Then you are ready," they said. "The power within you will guide you. But remember, there will be those who will try to stop you. Your enemies are still out there. They will stop at nothing to claim the power you hold." "I know," Alara said, her voice firm. "But I'm not alone. I have Lucas. And I have all of you. Together we can fight back." The figure nodded again. "Then it is time." With a deep breath, Alara closed her eyes and reached deep within herself. The energy inside her surged to the surface, filling her body with light and power. She felt the weight of the universe pressing down on her, but she didn't shy away from it. She embraced it, allowing the power to flow through her. The room around her seemed to blur, and for a moment she saw flashes of stars, of ships, of ancient civilizations. It was as if her past, her people, and her future all converged in that one moment. And then, with a final burst of energy, the light within her exploded outward, sending a shockwave through the base. When the light faded, Alara stood tall, her wings fully unfurled, glowing with an intensity she had never felt before. She was no longer just a girl with lost memories. She was something more, something powerful, and she was ready to fight for the future. Lucas stood beside her, his eyes wide with awe. "You did it," he whispered. Alara nodded, a sense of purpose filling her heart. "This is just the beginning."